Paranormal Government Conscript, Part 3 by Austin Murre. Okay, I'm gonna carry him. Scotch squatted down, allowing Abraham's limp body to slump over his shoulders. Scotch then stood up and shifted the weight into a more comfortable position. He then looked at me and said, "Lead the way, Canary." "Are you gonna be able to run like that?" asked Svartberg. Scotch nodded. "Even if I blow my fucking knees out." "Guys, there's something out there. I can feel it," I told them. "I don't know if running is enough." Scotch and Svartberg both briefly engaged glances before turning back to me. Svartberg showed his 2 karambit knives, and Scotch suddenly produced a Glock 17 pistol. I asked Scotch, "Will that help?" "I don't know. This wasn't meant for the entities." An awkward silence overcame the 3 of us as Svartberg raised an eyebrow. Scotch just squinted in his direction. Then he turned back to me and asked, "You got a weapon, rookie?" "No. This was supposed to be an easy assignment." Scotch shrugged, which bounced the limp Abraham up, causing the barely conscious man to moan. I cast my eyes back into the labyrinth. Svartberg pulled his other shoe off and chucked it against one of the slithering arms. "Take my other one, why don't you?" he muttered before turning into the slot machine labyrinth. "Let's go, rookie. You lead the way." Every inch between me and the slithering mass of limbs gave me some peace of mind. However, I still felt a constant uneasiness. It was difficult for me to distinguish normal anxiety and stress from that of the supernatural. When in the Institute, there was always some paranormal nonsense happening in different departments. I had a psych evaluation, where it was concluded that I was perfectly normal, just psychically sensitive. I asked for anti-anxiety medication and was told that my skills were too valuable to suppress. I then asked for a hair transplant after I went bald from the stress. That was in the budget. Oddly enough, wandering this dark casino was less stressful than working in the North American epicenter office of paranormal intelligence. The absolute silence of this dark casino was worse than any sound. Any building produced something of ambiance, be it either the creaking floorboards or groaning pipes, but not this casino. There wasn't even an echo of our footsteps. Above us, the ceiling had vanished, and in its stead there was an endless black expanse. Somehow that was more unsettling than dangling over a dark pit. My mind simply couldn't wrap my head around it. It was unnatural, and it nauseated me. "Stop looking up," Svartberg said. "You'll never really get used to it. Even astronauts have a point of reference when in space." Svartberg walked right behind me, and Scotch held up the rear. We walked without incident as we retraced our steps. However, we couldn't seem to find the stairs back down to the lobby. "What if there's no way out?" I asked Svartberg. Svartberg stared at me silently with a blank and stoic expression. "Then we're just another file covered with black ink." "That's it? No rescue team? Nothing?" Svartberg only shook his head, then pointed forward, prompting me to continue. The slot machine labyrinth stretched without end. Despite the uneasiness, I felt no threatening presence and was surprisingly calm. I counted my blessings and could appreciate the fact that I wasn't alone. After an hour or so, Scotch said, "I need a break," as he gently lowered Abraham to the ground. "I thought you said you were going to carry him until your knees blew out," said Svartberg. Scotch, who had ditched his suit jacket, had soaked armpits from the sweat. With his hands on his hips and after a few deep breaths, he squinted towards Svartberg, but didn't say anything. Instead, Scotch looked towards me and asked, "Is it safe to rest now?" I don't know. I feel somewhat conflicted. Obviously, this is all very frightening, and I'm wondering what horrible things we might see next. But I also feel strangely calm and certain. "Certain of what?" asked Svartberg. "That we're going in the right direction." Scotch and Svartberg exchanged glances, then looked back at me. Scotch, still heaving, gave a thumbs up. We took a brief break, during which Svartberg smoked a cigarette and Scotch climbed atop a slot machine. Scanning all directions, Scotch concluded that we were in the middle of a vast maze with no end in sight. The slithering mass of limbs was nowhere to be seen. Using my sleeve and some spit, I cleaned the dried blood off of Abraham. Svartberg had tried to open Instagram, but then resided to scrolling through his pictures when no connection could be found. Scotch sat atop the slot machine and watched from over Svartberg's shoulder. "Where's that?" Svartberg turned and looked up at Scotch. He then looked back down at his screen and said, "Home. Something I'll never see again. Even if we make it out of this casino, you're going to kill me." Svartberg tossed his cigarette butt, then grabbed a second cigarette and lit it immediately. "Just doing my job," said Scotch. "You should too. There's a reason you're forced to be here. You, and men like you, hold hell at bay." "No one ever asked me if I wanted this," said Svartberg. "No one cared." Scotch gasped. "No one ever asked the starving child in Africa if they wanted that life. They didn't have a choice. The difference between you and that child, Svartberg, is that you stand between hell and earth. Because as hard as life is for those little kids who are in the cobalt mines, I can guarantee you that life is 100 times better than no life at all. You sacrifice yourself so that regular people, like that kid, can hope and dream. If I were you, I'd be proud." I looked up at Scotch and noted a little twinkle in his eyes. To me, he just sounded like one of those brainwashed military nutjobs who had been convinced by propaganda that invading the Middle East was to protect America. However, for the first time, I realized that his motives were not entirely career and ego-driven. Svartberg did not respond. He just gazed longingly into his phone. I didn't see his screen, but by the green glow that illuminated his face, I imagined pictures of nature. He took one deep breath through his cigarette, replacing the green glow with an orange one, before exhaling and shrouding his face in smoke. It was at this moment, halfway through Svartberg's second cigarette, that I felt something stir within me. I flashed my beam down the way we came and saw a man standing at the far end of my light, just out of sight. Behind me, I heard 2 foldable knives click open as 2 more beams joined mine to cast the distant figure in light. The figure wore a dark blue suit, very suited to the surrounding casino, and stepped forward so that we could better see him. Smiling, the dealer came back into our view, roughly 20 paces far from us. "Say the word, Canary, and I'll say a prayer and put a bullet between his eyes," said Scotch. But I didn't feel threatened by the dealer. The exact opposite, in fact. Previously, this had been a trap, and some healthy distance was required. However, I felt compelled to let him speak. "Curious, aren't you?" said the dealer while looking at me. He then followed up with, "I like that name, by the way. The Dealer. It seems fitting for me." "Who are you?" I asked. "You cannot comprehend me. Your meaty hardware struggles to understand concepts beyond the scope of your ancestors' immediate survival. Even your greatest academics struggle to understand concepts like infinity, numbers so mind-bogglingly large that your software glitches. If they cannot even understand a concept as simple as infinity, what makes you think you could ever understand something like negative infinity?" "You sound like a pompous nerd," said Scotch. The dealer looked at him and said, "You're just bitter because I told you you'd never be a Black Ox. You aspire to be a defender of Earth, to make yourself feel bigger than you are. But no matter how big you become, it will make no difference. You still think like a resource-hungry animal, and you are. Humans are closer to beasts than they are to anything transcendent." "Will we ever transcend?" asked Svartberg. The dealer smiled and said, "I don't know. The truth is that I know infinitely more than you, but there are different sizes of infinity. Imagine counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Now imagine the endless possibilities between 0 and 1. That goes inward. 0.1. 0.01, 0.001, 0.0001, and so forth. In order for you to understand the expressions that I could bestow upon you, you must make the leap from your finite understanding. Slowly, this is happening. And sometimes some people catch brief glimpses of the divine due to either deep meditation or psychedelic substances, but those glimpses are fleeting. So then, where does that leave us? I asked him. The dealer smiled widely. He stared at us for a long moment, stretching this uncanny silence for far longer than necessary. Finally, he stated, "I want to show you what's between 0 and 1. Before I had the moment to process what he had said, the slithering mass of limbs came down from above and grabbed every square inch of me. I couldn't even give spastic struggle and defiance as I was lifted into the dark abyss above. The sky felt like a thick liquid. The ground below vanished in an instant. I went higher and higher at speeds I thought the human body could never withstand. I lived the life of a Roman soldier from birth to death by arrow, and I lived the life of the Carthaginian archer. As a vulture, I saw the battlefield below on which that Roman perished alongside 10,000 other lives. Each one of those men I slid from their mothers' wombs. I felt the roller coaster of their lives up until the point they all merged into a bloody pulp on the desert floor. Then I descended from the sky with onyx wings and feasted upon the flesh. I felt the adrenaline of hunting prey with my wolf pack, and I felt the fear and isolation of the doe that ran until it collapsed from exhaustion, and the confusion as teeth tore into my flesh. I was some ancient Goliath, undiscovered and unnamed by man, whose existence would never be catalogued by humans. I stared up at the sky as a fireball came down. Air came in through the pores on my skin as I lived a peaceful and non-sentient life on a young Earth. I was the creeping moss that covered the land and paved the way for the first aquatic life to take to the land. I whipped the slaves in the cotton fields and ordered the execution of the Jews during the Holocaust. I lived the lives of these evil men and understood their twisted logic. I lived the lives of the men and women who secretly freed slaves and funneled them to safety. I stormed Normandy and liberated concentration camps. I cursed Hitler, I saluted him, and I was him. I was Neil Armstrong and the first person to step onto Mars. I was the artificial intelligence that guided man to new stars and the children who were born in those distant worlds. I was cloned in a vat and built by machine. I suffered from pain and anxiety and lived lives of confidence and joy. I committed suicide and murder. I raped, pillaged, and plundered. I killed for all gods and died in their names by the hand of lives I too commanded. I was all victims and culprits. I stared with pride and joy into the faces of my sons and daughters. Each life felt as fleeting as the last, no matter the time span, the achievements, or the pain. I would emerge from an egg as a newborn snake with complete ignorance of how to be anything other than a serpent. Each body I possessed became my own universe, and as I piloted that vessel, I was ignorant of other times. In a way, each and every life became its own infinity, as that life would know only itself from within. Each experience passed in the blink of an eye, and yet I felt it in full. The liquid that was my consciousness passed through every container that ever was and ever will be, while the ocean of life somehow condensed all its contents into the teacup that was the mind of Austin Murre. I felt my mind bloat, split, contort, and bubble as it morphed. My body was distant, non-existent, as I was formless and infinite. I understood, briefly, for a fraction of a second, the meaning of it all. Something so simple it cannot be defined by man's insistence to understand. And then suddenly, I awoke. The endless string of all lives that had ever lived vanished in an instant as I slipped back into the body I knew as Austin Murre. Although now I knew there was reality inexplicable to the human mind. I was a virus, bestowed the experience of man, and then reduced back to nothing. So it felt. To have seen it all, and then to have it taken away. Intense, isn't it? The dealer said. I had to acclimate back to my vessel, but ultimately, through a trembling jaw, I said, "What just happened?" I noticed I lay on the red carpet of the casino floor. I wanted to stand, but my body felt alien to me. I could only stare up at the dealer as he said, "What you just experienced was me peeling back a tiny sliver of reality." "Are you God?" I asked him. The dealer laughed. "I show you all of that, and you still think in those terms. Come on." God is a concept made by man. Do you think any beasts of earth could even begin to fathom the truth? If I can't fathom it, why did you show me? Oh, the body and mind that you inhabit cannot fathom it, but the consciousness that flows through you can. You, the brain of Austin, saw a brief glimpse of the consciousness that fills all beings. In a way, I placed a mirror before the very essence of life, and your feeble, finite eyes just happened to absorb the image. Although bodies separate you from others, that which inhabits all bodies is all a single viewer. You are the universe experiencing itself, and each experience is self-encapsulated. The dealer grabbed me by my hair and lifted me to my feet. I hugged myself and leaned against the slot machine, mouth ajar as I felt the synapses in my head morph back. The memories faded until they were no longer in my mind. Only the vaguest knowledge that I had experienced all life was there. The actual images, smells, and senses unknown to humans evaporated, and what was left was an aftertaste of it all. Although my body returned to me, it felt as though all molecules had been replaced, and that I was an imposter squatting in a house that did not belong to him. The dealer stared at me blankly as I got my bearings. I was alone with him in the labyrinth of slot machines. "Where's my squad?" "You'll see them soon enough. I have one more thing to show you. This time it will be unpleasant." My breath stifled, and I stared at him like a deer caught in the headlights. "Do I have a choice?" "No, you don't. I'm sorry," the dealer said dryly. "I will do it now. There's no point in waiting." Before I could protest, I was tugged by my ankles and dragged through the labyrinth. I screamed and attempted to grab the passing machines, but my hand passed right through everything as though they were holograms. But it was I who had become ethereal. The hands dragged me into a dark corner no larger than a few centimeters in diameter. Yet, as I watched myself be dragged into the darkness, the world around me morphed and stretched larger until gaping holes were the size of mountains, and then I was swallowed. The very fabric of reality began to vibrate. The electrons and nuclei that were held together by the laws of my reality broke their bonds, the particles jetting into all directions. I evaporated in an instant, leaving only my consciousness behind. In this realm, I hung suspended. I wasn't sure if I was in air, liquid, or standing on some fifth-dimensional landscape. Beneath me floated leviathans of some eldritch horror. Something akin to whale songs reverberated through me. I wanted to look away, but even with a turned head and closed eyes, I saw them. It was pitch black, yet I could see terameters in all directions, all at once, as though my visual perception had become 360. Light particles did not exist here. The laws of physics had been fundamentally rearranged. I knew this, although I wasn't sure how. Knowledge had been inserted into me. Too much knowledge. My mind was not meant to comprehend this realm. The leviathans ignored me, yet I felt observed by some all-powerful presence. The sky, if I could call it that, then turned, and I was made aware that there was no sky at all, but rather an orb the size of 1,000,000 suns. The surface, so mind-bogglingly large that even from this distance it seemed a flat expanse that encompassed half the observable universe. Yet, despite my infinitesimal size, I had managed to catch its attention. Without eyes nor any features stretching across its surface, I knew only by my instincts that it had seen me. How could I possibly understand the intentions of something so monolithic, so ancient? What could I possibly have done to draw its attention other than be alien in this world? "You are not meant to be here," whispered a voice in the back of my head. a voice I might have confused for my own inner dialogue. I watched in horror as the black expanse split and began to separate. For the first time in this realm, I saw color. In the belly of this monumental being burned the fires of hell. And then, just as I was about to fall into this demonic sky, I was pulled back, seemingly through some mesh or membrane, and spat back out of the shadows of my own reality. The dealer caught me and kept me standing as I spasmed and struggled against his grip. I ripped myself loose and sprinted as fast as I possibly could down the red carpet. I zigzagged and took random corners and curves in a frantic effort to escape the insanity. The dealer then suddenly stood before me in the middle of the walkway and asked, "Where are you running?" I turned on my heels and bolted the other direction, taking more chaotic turns and twists to shake him off my tail, but to no avail. He somehow appeared again before me casually in the middle of the walkway. "Do you think those little legs will create any distance that matters?" Again, I turned, but this time I deftly climbed atop the slot machines and began running across the tops, jumping the walkways and cutting straight over the maze. I wanted to get out of this godforsaken casino. I wanted to escape, just as Svartberg had planned. I would prefer to become a homeless drifter than continue working for the Institute. And if the Institute caught me, then I would take my own life. But nothing scared me more than the thought of dying here, in this realm between realities. Then I saw a light, far off in the distance. My legs grew stronger, my lungs stopped hurting, and my jaw clenched tightly as the staircase appeared. I must have crossed 500 meters in a minute, only to find the dealer standing between me and my escape. My fist loading a sucker punch that would make Superman tremble. I roared and launched myself off the wall of slot machines, fist cocked, knowing that my very soul was at stake. It was the most painful thing I had ever experienced. My fist, wrist, and fingers turned to jelly upon contact, and my forearm snapped. The dealer didn't even flinch. It was as if I had punched a block of steel. The dealer then pushed me, and I fell on my ass. I rolled to my feet while cradling my shattered arm, then attempted to slip past. The dealer immediately pushed me back down. "Will you stop? This accomplishes nothing." I let out a moan of agony and hopelessness. It had been less than a minute, and my arm had already swollen and begun turning blue. "Oh, boo-hoo," said the dealer. "I show you all the beauty and horror of your universe, and you still cry about a broken arm. Your human form is limiting. I know your kind. You're animals. You care more about your own sick child than you do about a genocide across the globe." The dealer snapped his fingers. The muscles in my arm twisted and my bones fell back into place. The pain vanished in an instant. At this point, I had been psychologically and physically abused, as well as what I like to call spiritually molested. "What the hell do you want, man?" I shouted. The dealer pointed at me. I felt the pressure in my chest. He then whipped his finger up, and the pressure in my chest pulled me to my feet. The dealer then curled his fingers into a fist, causing the air around me to constrict and hold me in place. His expressions became oddly somber as he rested a hand on my shoulder. "Son, you are caught between worlds. Your soul bleeds into the fabric of reality and drips through the mesh. Whether you like to admit it or not, you are tied to other realms. I'm going to use terms you are familiar with, but please don't take this literally. The Bible is about as accurate to reality as Lord of the Rings is similar to the Dark Ages." The dealer coughed into his fist, scratched his chin, thought for a moment, and then continued with, "That orb you saw was the Antichrist. You stood at the doorstep of hell. Soon, hell's doorstep is coming to you." Does that make him the devil and you an angel? Things are not so black and white. Do you consider microbes? Do you have contempt or love for bacteria? What about a virus? Some, yeah, definitely. People cursed the plague. Corona never really affected me, but some people lost their jobs and family. Yes, but the microbes in your gut, or on your skin, and in the air. They hardly cross your mind. You would not stare into a microscope and curse an individual coronavirus. And so, that devil you saw didn't look at you with hate. It does, however, hate life as a whole. It wants to purify this realm. It is ancient. It cannot bleed nor breathe. It does not know the sensation of touch, and therefore does not value the experiences of this realm. It sees life as a plague upon a once pristine and spotless realm it called its home. But it can retch, and it can scream, and it can perform rituals. It has a will. It is death incarnated into sentience. The floor tremored softly, and a deep groaning sound came from above. The dealer looked up at the pitch-black sky. After a long moment, he looked back at me and continued. Do you understand why I let you live all lives that have lived? That is what is at stake. What the hell am I supposed to do? I'm just a germ, according to you. The dealer gave me a gentle pat on the head and smiled. More like a multi-celled organism. You're a tiny step in the direction of evolving, but it will take an unfathomable amount of time. Unfathomable to you. Again, there was a tremor and a groan, this time louder. The mere sound of it made my vision blurry with the vibrations. The dealer looked up again. I have to send you back. Do not tell anyone. Things will become more clear as you continue. The dealer released me and allowed me a moment to get my bearings, but there was too much to process. I stared at him slack-jawed and traumatized. Part of me wanted to ask this seemingly omnipotent being questions that had always nagged me, or perhaps something stupid like the winning lottery numbers. Could I even trust him? If we were just little germs, why did he care if Earth vanished or not? A tremor began rolling in. This next one was going to rip me to shreds. I felt it in the buildup. I looked at the dealer expectantly. Get me out of here, I shouted. I don't know the winning lottery numbers, just like you don't know every grain of sand. And I do care. After all, do you know a single man who can live without his microbes? The tremor became unbearable. The monumental groan from the space above became deafening. And just as I was about to faint, I saw through my blurry vision that the dealer was no longer a man, but some dull gray orb. The next thing I noticed was rustling branches in the wind and chirping birds. I opened my eyes and saw that I was face down on some cold asphalt in a pool of my own drool. Lifting my head, I saw that I lay in the parking lot. The casino had been replaced by an old sawmill with a sunken roof. Scotch, Abraham, and Svartberg lay not too far from me, still unconscious. Hey, I called out while sitting upright. The first to react was Scotch, who immediately sprung awake, eyes wide and darting wildly in all directions. He glanced at me, then at the sawmill, then at our sedan, and then to Abraham. He opened his mouth to speak, but instead began coughing, before clearing his lungs and spitting. You okay, rookie? After a moment of cycling through responses, I landed on, I think so. Scotch walked up to Abraham and used his feet to roll him on his back. I'm really tired of carrying this lump around, he told me before crouching down and gently slapping Abraham's face. Wake up, you fat fuck. What did you see in there, Scotch? I asked him. He met my gaze and squinted. Everything you saw. Why? I wasn't so certain of that. Scotch didn't seem all too shaken up by everything. Then again, this was my first assignment. Maybe this was routine for him. I couldn't imagine staying sane after more than a month doing this job. What did you see in there, Murre? He then probed suspiciously. We stared at each other briefly. Then I said, The dealer. Did you see the dealer? Yeah, arrogant know-it-all. I hate entities like that. Right, I said before getting to my feet and approaching Svartberg. If anyone else was going to have the VIP multiverse tour, it would be him. I crouched down and said softly, Svartberg, you awake? Then shook him lightly. He opened his eyes and looked at me, then rubbed his forehead. His dazed and overwhelmed expression led me to believe that he had also been to strange places. "Did you see it too?" I asked him softly so that Scotch couldn't hear us. Svartberg scanned me with wide eyes before nodding. "What did he show you?" I asked him. Svartberg shook his head and said, "Not now." He grabbed my hand and I helped him up, after which he dusted off his clothes. Scotch looked at us with an unconscious Abraham at his feet. "Could you lend me a hand?" he asked. A moment later, we were loading Abraham into the back seat of the car. Scotch then slipped behind the wheel. Svartberg was in the back seat and I sat in the passenger seat. We were dead quiet for over 45 minutes until Svartberg said, "Pull over, I need to take a leak." "Nope," said Scotch. "I don't trust you. We're going back to the Institute." "We're in the middle of the forest at night. My clothes are ripped and I don't have any shoes anymore. Where am I running?" Scotch didn't reply, but after another moment on the road, he pulled over. He unlocked the car and said, "Make it quick. I got my eye on you." Svartberg stepped out of the car, lit a cigarette, and wandered up to a tree. Scotch kept his flashlight on him. While peeing, Svartberg looked back over his shoulder, a cigarette planted in his shallow smile. "This is weird," I told Scotch. "Do you like the show?" "The show is okay, I just don't like the actor," he mumbled back. Svartberg finished up, gave it a few shakes and then let out a satisfied sigh. Then, without warning, broke out into a sprint. "Hey!" shouted Scotch. His first instinct was to follow in pursuit, but after a few steps, he decided he had a better solution. He took aim, and before I could stop him, pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. "What the?" he mumbled while briefly inspecting his weapon. Then he pulled the trigger a few more times until Svartberg had disappeared into the dark night. I could still hear the rustle of his escape. Scotch pulled his magazine out to inspect the ammunition and found a used cigarette butt, but no bullets. He stared at it, perplexed for a moment, wondering what black magic had taken place, when his expression washed with a realization. He then turned to me. "He was the first one awake." Scotch holstered his gun and shook his head. Upon re-entering the car, we noticed that Abraham's shoes had disappeared. Svartberg had somehow concealed them on his person and was probably wearing them now in the forest. I couldn't imagine how that tiny Swede could fit the shoes of an exile American, but I guess big shoes are better than no shoes. "I should never have let him take a piss," grumbled Scotch as he started the Cadillac back up and began driving. In the distance, through the dark pillars of pines, we saw a flashlight shining into the sky. "I think that's him," I said. "Are you going to chase him?" "No, let's just tell the Institute that we lost track of him after the first encounter with the hands. They'll register him as MIA and presumed dead. Everybody wins." Scotch trailed off as a helicopter passed us overhead. We watched in silence as the helicopter hovered above the flashlight. It remained there for no more than 20 seconds, then jetted off, leaving the forest in a peaceful shadow. Scotch looked at me and stated, "I think Svartberg has the resources to make himself invisible. It won't affect my record, it's not like I wanted to kill him." "Sure looked like you did," I challenged. "No, I don't want to kill anyone, really. That's the reason I joined the Institute and not the Marines or Air Force. We're out here defending more than just our country. If you're in the military, you're just a pawn in the government's agenda, and very rarely do some good for the world. Your enemy then is someone exactly like you. We're killing brothers then, people who are just like us. But here," Scotch took a moment to slap the car's dashboard, "right here, what we do, that actually makes a difference. I've killed demons before they had the chance to run rampant through an urban environment. So no, I didn't want to kill Svartberg, but I would have because those were my orders. I don't know the bigger picture. I don't know what's at stake, but I believe that what we do makes a difference." "So why are you letting him go then, if the Institute gave you the orders and you believe they know best?" "They know better than me, but they don't know best. Besides, something happened in the casino. I had some experience, followed by amnesia or something. I don't remember exactly what, it was too much for me to process and hold on to. However, as everything was slipping out of my mind, I kept repeating something over and over again so that I could hold on to the essence of that lesson I had learned while I was bigger than life itself. What was it? I am the universe experiencing itself. And why did that affect your decision to let Svartberg live? Well, if I am the universe experiencing itself, then so is Svartberg, and I think Svartberg has our interests at heart. So against my better judgment, I'm going to let him live. We arrived at the Institute headquarters an hour later, where Abraham was immediately wheeled off to get medical aid. Scotch and I were taken to separate rooms immediately. 3 stern people in lab coats probed me with a bombardment of questions, many of which I didn't have any answer for. I felt like I was in that cold metal room longer than I was in the casino, and I had experienced all of history in the casino, although I didn't tell them that part of the story, nor the part of Svartberg's escape. When I finally stepped out, a man in a casual shirt approached me. He looked completely out of place here, where everyone else always wore some stuck-up suit or research attire. Instead, this man wore jeans and a mint-colored hoodie. "Mr. Murre," he said while approaching, "I want to apologize for this assignment. I came immediately when I heard what had happened to Agents Abraham and Svartberg. Again, I am very sorry." He shook my hand firmly and gave me a sympathetic expression. "Thank you. I hated it," I said dryly. "If this is what you have in store for me, you better just put a bullet in my head right now, because I'm not going to do this on a monthly basis." "Well, son, I can't say I blame you. You seem to have had a rough start. If it makes you feel any better, Topside has noticed you. Also, Agent Scotch commended you for your bravery and resourcefulness. He said you were the best canary he'd ever seen." Yeah," I said. "Who are you anyway?" He smiled. "You can call me William. William Schultz. Why don't you take a 2-week vacation?" He handed me a credit card and patted me on the shoulder. "You can go straight to the airport and just buy everything you'll need with this. Ticket, clothes, hotel, food, everything. Don't worry about it. This card works everywhere and has no limit. You've earned it. And again, please accept my most sincere apology. We're happy to have you on the team." William winked, turned, and left the conversation. I looked down at the small credit card in my hand. It looked like some corporate credit card, except it was black with no features on it, not even a Visa or a MasterCard logo. I had expected a Limitless credit card to feel heavier for some reason, perhaps made out of metal, but no. But I was definitely going to test it out. I ordered an Uber and stepped out into the sunlight. It was noon already. Without really realizing it, I had been awake for over 36 hours. Next stop, Tokyo with a first-class ticket. I pulled out my wallet and slipped the credit card in, when a small receipt caught my attention. Immediately, I knew that wasn't mine. It read, 2 6-packs Bud Light, 1 pack of Marlboro. On the other side, scribbled in blue ink, "See you soon." Thank you guys for listening to this story by Austin Murre. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have a story you'd like to hear on the channel, please email it to me at awfultoastreads@gmail.com. I'd really appreciate it. And as always, have a good day.